Hello everyone, this is Sheba Joy. Welcome to my channel Zion Shekinah Official. Zion means God's dwelling place, Shekinah is God's glory. Today I want to talk about Gideon. We all know that Gideon was not a soldier, Gideon was not in the army, and Gideon was not an artillery guy or someone who belonged to an army or in the king's court to fight battles, but he was a common man. And we find a very interesting story here in Gideon, and that is through Gideon, God wins the battle for the Israelites against Midianites. So we'll see here in chapter 6. I'm not going to read the whole entire chapter, but you can go ahead and read. It's in Judges 6 and 7 is what you should be reading. Judges chapter 6 and Judges chapter 7. So in 6, we see that Gideon actually is a very timid man, is a very kind of like a coward. He's a man, you can say he's soft in nature. He doesn't like battles. He doesn't like going for, fighting the army or anything like that. But here, the first instinct that we recognize here is that that Gideon's strength is recognized by God. And that's number one point that I want to make, because most of the time when we don't know what our strengths are and our weaknesses are, it's always best to go before God, because God already knows what our strengths and weaknesses are. And sometimes, if even in my life I think, oh, I'm not that capable of going against these people. I'm kind of like scared to go against these people, or I'm kind of I fear them, because they have gangs, they have mobs, they work in like groups and all that demonic stuff, and then they will work with demonic stuff. But here God shows that it's not the number, it's not the people, or it's not who it is, but it is only God, and it is only Him that we fight the battle, and it is only Him that He gives us the victory, because God sees what is in us. He sees the potential in us, because when we can't see what is happening around us, because most of the time we see so much of chaos, so much of nonsense, so much of wickedness around us. So then we might feel, oh, we're not up to the mark to do what we're supposed to do then. But when we rely on God, when we strengthen ourselves in God, this is how He comes, just as He has come for Gideon. And in Judges 6 chapter 11 verse, it says, the angel of the Lord came down and sat under an oak in Ophrah that belonged to Joash the Abiezrite, where his son Gideon was threshing wheat in a winepress to keep it from the Midianites. When the angel of the Lord appeared to Gideon, he said, the Lord is with you, mighty warrior. See, he actually is like a farmer, and he was trying to gather everything, the wheat, and he was trying to get it ready. He was making the wheat ready in the wine press, so that these Midianites don't come and loot them, don't come and rob them. So he was trying to get safeguard their cultivation, safeguard their farm, the farming, the crop. So he was trying to get things done, and he was trying to save his field, save his work from the Midianites from robbing. But the angel of the Lord meets him at that point, and the angel tells him, the Lord is with you, mighty warrior. And Gideon becomes very shocked. In verse 13, if we see, pardon me, my Lord, Gideon replied, but if the Lord is with us, why has all this happened to us? Where are all his wonders that our ancestors told us about when they said, did not the Lord bring us out of Egypt? But now the Lord has abandoned us and given us into the hand of Midian. So as soon as and then at this point, Gideon doesn't think that he is the angel of the Lord. He thinks, because the angel of the Lord comes in the form of a man, so the angel of the Lord is sitting on a rock, and he calls him the mighty man of warrior. But Gideon forgets, even forgets the statement that the angel makes, and he says, what are you talking about? Because the thing is, he's so immersed in the problems he has. He's so immersed in the attacks that the Midianites were giving him, all, not him, but all his fellow Israelites. He's so immersed in all the nonsense that they were going through, like all the in today's world, we can say we have enemies too. They gossip about us, they tell lies about us, they're wicked people. To get away with what they want to do in for their life, they literally kill, they literally snub, they literally put their feet on other people and then climb. And such is the nature of people today, who are wicked and all that. And we see that it has become so common. And if they have to climb a ladder, they have to snub somebody. If they have to achieve something, they want to kill someone. If they have to take someone's property, then they have to barge in, they have to encroach, they have to do, there are so many wicked things that the wicked people do. And so all these things happen to the Israelites. And even though the angel told him that he's a mighty man of valor, he's a mighty warrior. In another translation, it says it's a mighty man of valor, and is a mighty warrior in an IV. He doesn't record any of what the angel says, but he says, how can this be? Because the Lord is not with us. That's why all these things that have happened, we're going astray. He says, did not the Lord bring us out of Egypt? Then why has he abandoned us? And he feels sad at that. But also, I want to give you a gist on this. The reason that the Lord abandoned them, he has abandoned them, but he has not discarded the Israelites. He has been away. His hand was resting on them. Otherwise, they would have been attacked in no second, because the Israelites had enemies all around, all the time. So if God's hand was not on them, they would have been attacked, killed, and wiped out from the world today. Actually, if you see, their race wouldn't have been there. But God's hand. But for a moment, he just turned away. Why? Because these people, they believed in other gods. They believed in heathens. They believed in heathen gods. They believed in these Baal worship. They started engaging themselves in Baal worship. So, and if you see the chapters in Judges from 1 to 5, in 5 and 4 and all that, they actually have wars with the Amalekites and the Jezreelites and the Hivitites and all those people. So here, that's why the Lord has given them into the hands of the Midianites, because they should know. Because see, the Israelites were not knowing, even though they were seeing very clearly how God was protecting them, taking care of them. They were not able to acknowledge his presence all the time, and they kind of diverted themselves. They kind of went prostrate for the other gods. They kind of did demonic stuff, and I mean wicked stuff, So that thing, God will not allow that, because if he wants people to be on his side, he wants the right people. He wants the good people. He wants the people like God. He wants the people who will obey God. He wants the people who will do what God has created them to do, right? So these people were doing that. So he kind of shifted his attention. I would say not entirely discarded or abandoned them, but shifted his attention. And then so they were given into the hands of Midianites. But the time has come, because see, few people in the city will bring restitution and to the city, will bring reformation to the city, will bring restoration to the city. And how do we know that? We have also seen this in the time of Sodom and Gomorrah, because of Lot. God said if there were 1 people, 10 people, or at least 5 people, or at least 1 person, 5 people there, then he would bring restoration to that place. But they were not that, so he had to wipe out all those things. So here also, it's when we see that, Gideon becomes very scared and all that, and he asks the angel, how can this be? Then and then he says, so he examines such kind of thing. And then he says to the angel in 15, "Pardon me, my lord." Gideon replied, "But how can I save Israel? My clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my family." The Lord answered, "I will be with you, and you will strike down all the Midianites, leaving none alive." So God has promised what he has seen, what he wanted to do for Israelites, and so he does it with Gideon, a man who has no strength to do anything like that. He's almost a farmer. He's a common man. He has never never had any training in the artillery. He never had any training, or haven't even gone into the battle, or haven't even seen any wars happening there. He didn't even hold a gun or an arrow or a bow and an arrow or anything, or a spear or anything of that sort. So nothing of that. But God sees him as a man of warrior. Why? Because Gideon's heart is known to God. Like that, everybody's heart is known to God, and he will reward, he will give the same thing. He will give equally everything that the Lord says that he's going to give for each of us according to the heart we have before him. So finally what happens is in 7, now they're preparing for battle. Okay, so the Lord here has given Gideon and Gideon, being a common man and trusting in God, but at the same time having doubts and all that, he asked God to give him some signs, and one of the signs is here in Judges 6. It says, "If you will save," Gideon said to God in verse 36, Gideon said to God, "If you will save Israel by my hand, as you have promised, look, I will place a wool fleece on the threshing floor. If there's dew only on the fleece and all the ground is dry, then I will know that you will save Israel by my hand." And you said, and this is what happened. Gideon rose early the next day. He squeezed the fleece and wrung out the dew, a bowl full of water. Then Gideon said to God, "Do not be angry with me. Let me make just one more request. Allow me one more test with the fleece, but this time make the fleece dry and the ground be covered with dew." That night God did so. Only the fleece was dry and the ground was covered with dew. So 2 times he says. Once he says make the fleece dry, and the other times he says make the ground dry. So this way he tells God to show signs that God is with him, that he's going to give him the victory what the angel spoke. So, and God does that. And this is very important. Sometimes we can ask ourselves, how can this happen? How am I going to win this? How am I going to make them understand? Or how am I going to make this thing move? But it is not in our hands. When we are right in the hands, when we are right in front of God, when we are right in the sight of God, not in front of God, but in the sight of God, God makes things happen in a miraculous way. See, the little things that Gideon, tested God, God showed his faithfulness, so that Gideon can completely rely on God. So then at this point from chapter 7, Gideon starts believing in God completely. He does what God wants him to do. He has the strength of God. He moves in the direction of how God wants him to move, to acclaim the victory given by God. So what happens is, in chapter 7, I'm not going to read the entire thing, but in chapter 7 he goes and also he crushes the it says also I think he crushes no, that's in chapter 6. That's why he gets the name Jerubbaal. And in chapter 7, so they're preparing for battle. Now, when you go for a battle, you need people, right? As it is, Israelites were very few compared to the Midianites, and there were only 10,000 people. So, Gideon brings all of these people in front of God, but God says, no, I don't need so many people. Why? Because it says in Judges chapter 7, and verse 2, it says, "The Lord said to Gideon, you have too many men. I cannot deliver Midian into into their hands of Israel would boast against me. My own strength has saved me. Now announce to the army, anyone who trembles with fear may turn back and leave Mount Gilead. So 2,000 men left while 10,000 remained. So there were so many people, and God says, I'm not going to have you have so many people, because you would say, oh, with our strength we won the battle. This is not going to be your strength or your stuff. This is going to be the battle that I'm giving you, this is going to be the victory that I'm giving you for the battle that you just have to show up. So and he says that these are too many people, otherwise you would boast. So 2,000 men who were not even like who were like little they had fear about this battle, because they never, to me, I think, I can find out, to me, because these people never went into the battle literally until the Joshua time to fight officially into the armies and then besiege them and things like that. It never happened. But you have to see the history of Israelites, because they kept moving forward and God was with them, and the victories that they had were only from heaven. If you see so many stories from the Bible, from Genesis until actually Judges, if you see, God did many miracles. So these people were not even like were professionals in fighting the battle. They were like artillerymen, were like men who would do wars, who would wage wars and things like that. It was not like that. So they whoever could, and those 2,000 men who left, they left because they feared, it says in the Bible. Now Gideon is made to have only 10,000 people. In that 10,000 people also, we see in chapter 7 that God asks them to separate. And then the ones, when they go to the water and drink water, these 10,000 people, it says in chapter 7 and verse 5, so Gideon took the men down to the water. There the Lord told him, separate those who lap the water with the tongues as the dog laps, from those who leap down to drink. So he's saying separate those people. So some here, what happens is, I don't have to read like the entire thing, you can read later, but the thing is, these people, some people, when they go to the water, they go and drink like dog. They like bend down and then lap with their tongues to get water into their mouths, and they drink it. Other people, what they do is, they take water, cup their hands, take water into their hands, and then they drink it. So the Lord separates these two people, and he says the ones who have drunk with the like the dogs, lapping into the water and collecting water and drinking like that, he says send them away. So when that happens, they are left with, Gideon is left with only 300 men. And that's a pretty small, very small number, right? When they're going to an army, when they're going to a battle against Midianites, who are very, very large. Because even Midianites had other subgroups or sub-people that were with them. Usually, when we see in Israel's history that Israel was the only one nation or one group of people or one tribe that went against many people together. What I mean by this is that, if Midianites came and fought, they had also the other groups with them, other small subdivision, subgroup kings, continents or sub people, sub nations, people who like gathered with the Midianites, and they came against Israel. So also and also when Amalekites, Hivitites, all these people, when they came, they didn't come as just one group. The Amalekites didn't come and fight Israel. The Hivitites didn't come and fight Israel. The Jebusites didn't come and fight Israel. It was like all these people coming together, even though they were wicked, even though they were enemies against each other, yet they came together to fight Israelites. See, that is the thing, we don't have to fear these wretched enemies or the wretched people who have groups, who have people together, who have gossiped, who have done so much harm. They might be in groups, but with God on our side, we can scale every wall, it says. With God, on my side, I can scale every wall. With God on my side, I can win every battle, and that I have done so, and I will be doing it. With God on my side, I can see I can see the wicked fall like locusts, like worms, like everything. With God on my side, we can advance an army, it says in the Bible. So it is not about, it is not about who's on our side, it is not about who's going to give support, it is not about, but with God, God being God on our side is enough. So here we see in chapter 7 there are only 300 men, and if you and I were in that position of Gideon, we would be like, what is God doing? I mean, in our physical mind, in our carnal mind, in our physical being, we would think, what is this? Are we going to some small kiddie party, or are we going to some like an engagement party, or are we going to some like a small party, or an in India we have large groups for any kind of occasion. So let's say for a house dedication or something like that. No, we don't. So we would go, but this, we would think like that, right? But Gideon also must have thought, because it's like, when they gathered together, there were thousands of people gathering around to do the feast and to make celebration and all that, these Israelites. But when they had to go for war, it was only 300 people. And Gideon must have thought, what is this? It is much, much, much lesser than the people that I used to feast with or celebrate with. Now, what is happening? All these things must have been in his mind. But here we don't see him doubt God. Here we don't see him question God in chapter 7. Here his mind is totally focused on God. His strength is dependent on God. His victory he has played, his battle he has faced in God's hands, and he is sure to expect a victory, because why? God was with him. So when this happened, they go with 300 men, and then Gideon also sees a dream. It says in chapter 7 and 13, he says that he has a dream. Actually, he says it was a round loaf of barley that came tumbling into the Midianite camp. Then immediately they interpret that dream and say that they have won the battle and God has given them the victory. And so the enemies into the Midianites into the Israelites. They have given God has given the Midianites into the hands of Israelites. So they interpret that. Gideon gains strength with that, and then he worships God. He bows down and he worships God. Then with the 300 men, he kind of like how he goes into the army is with the 300 men, he divides them. Now, he divides them into 3 groups, maybe 100 each. And if you see 100 each for a battle, that would be very crazy, right? Like, who would go with only 100 people? Like, if they have to go some from the front, some from the back, some from the sides, or some from anywhere surrounding the place or surrounding the Midianites, it would at least take 4 groups, or it would at least take 4 different corners, and it would at least take like thousands of people. But here Gideon had only 3 groups. Each group had only 100 people, because 300 people went with him. He makes into division. Now we would think, oh, he went there, he did that, but God was with him. But then also he took, spears and bow and arrows and swords and this and that and all that. No, they did not take any of those things. All they took was so here, we would think that they have gone with all these, artillery and things like that, but it's not the case. All they go is with torches, with jars, clay jars, and also they go out with trumpets, it says in the Bible. If you see in chapter 7 and, chapter 7 and verse 19, 20, I think. Yeah, 20. So the 3 companies blew the trumpets. See, they go with if you see if you see chapter 7 and 17. So they go with such things. And when they go in there, Gideon tells them instructions. He tells them, do exactly as I do. So when they go into the enemy's camp, you know what they do? They don't throw the bow and arrows. They don't shoot at them. They don't put their swords into their into their physical beings. They don't do anything. all they do is they crack the jars, they break the clay jars, they blow the trumpets, and they light up the torches. With this, the enemies see them, and they fear, and so much fear grips them that it says they have fled the place. I mean, can you imagine someone going into a battle with trumpets, with clay jars? I mean, are they going for a dance, or are they going for any celebration, or are they going for any traditional thing? No, right? They're going for a battle. But for battle, what is required? The swords are required, the armor is required, the shields are required, the helmets are required, the boots, I mean, those are strong boots are required, the gowns are required, I mean, the artillery that they wear, for protection, all those things are required. Did they go with any of those things? No, they did not go any of those things. They went with some clay jars. Who goes with the clay jars to the battle? They went with trumpets. Who goes there? Trumpets is for celebration, clay jars is for just in those times when they didn't have all these utensils like steel and iron and all those things, they used to cook in those clay jars. So they went with that. I mean, when did they go there to inhabit the place and settle there and have a nice tent there to enjoy some summer afternoons or something like that, cook there and have some barbecue or something? No, it was not that. They just went with those things, and also they went with the torches, as if they were going there to spend the night there, so around a campfire or something like that. This is how, folks, this is how Gideon leads the army, leads God's people, Israelites, against the Midianites. And when they go, it says in Judges 7, chapter 7, 22, it says, when the 300 trumpets sounded, the Lord caused the men throughout the camp to turn on each other with their sword. The army fled to Bethshittah towards Zerah, as far as the border of Abel Meholah, near Tabbath. Israelites from Naphtali, Asher, and all Manasseh were called out, and they pursued the Midianites. Gideon sent messengers throughout the hill country of Ephraim, saying, come down against the Midianites and seize the waters of Jordan ahead of them as far as Beth-barah. So, and not only that, and then they seized these people, and they killed two important people who were actually going against the Israelites, and they were captured. It says in chapter 7, verse 25, it says they also captured two of the Midianite leaders. They were leaders actually, Oreb and Zeb. That means these may be the most wicked people who are the drive force of every wicked thing to happen for Israelites. So they captured two of the Midianite leaders, Oreb and Zeb. They killed Oreb at the rock of Oreb and Zeb at the winepress of Zeb. They pursued the Midianites and brought the heads of Oreb and Zeb to Gideon, who was by the Jordan. Did you see this? I mean, what a God we serve. Reading this has really positioned me into the goodness of God, has positioned me into knowing that God is all able, has positioned me into thinking that God is what I want at this time, has positioned me to think that God is all I want. It has positioned me to think that God is, He is my victory. God on my side. There can be thousands and millions of enemies, but all of them will be accounted to nothing. Why? Because here we see that God was with Gideon and Israelites, and so they won the battle. And see what happened when the 300 men sounded with trumpets and all that. The Lord caused all these enemies to turn on each other with their swords. Did you see that? Actually, they had swords. These people didn't even have one sword. Can you believe a person going into war, a battle, not having a sword? But that is the work of the Lord, folks. That is the work of the Lord. He does wonderful things. He does marvelous things. And when they went into a battle like that, what exactly happened is they went into a battle like that and they won the battle without the sword. And not only that, the two leaders, Oreb and Zeb, who were the leaders, who were wicked people, who were the drive force of all this wickedness, these Midianite leaders, their heads were brought. They were killed and their heads were brought to Gideon. So did they fight? No. Was there a bloodshed? No. But what happened? God made themselves to fight amongst themselves with each other with their own swords, kill each other, and also they fled, it says in the Bible. So that is our God. And reading this, and then it's very important for us to know that, if we are in the right standing, some people say, oh, God will help us. No, he will not help anyone and everyone like that. Why? Because God sees who is just, who is right, who is doing something good, and who is doing bad. So he will not, even though people are Christians, even though, suppose for example, some people, they are Christians. One group of Christians may say, God is going to help us, and those one group of Christians are good people. The other group of Christians are also Christians, but they're wicked Christians. So they might also say, no, God will help us. No, he won't. Why? Because you have disobeyed the God's laws. This wicked group has disobeyed God's laws. This wicked group were against the good group. This wicked group, and both knew the same God, right? Both know the same God. Yet one group was wicked in the eyes of God, and the other group was obedient in the eyes of God. So who will God support? Even though both of them are Christians, both the groups belong to God, both the groups have worshipped the same God, at least one from outside and the other group from inside, so inside their hearts. And that's the true worship, right? So all these things, when these things have transpired, these things have taken place, God is going to see who is right in the sight of God. And God's scale, God's measurement, God's vengeance, God's judgment is entirely pure and clean. And I say this because God is referred to in this chapter, in chapter 7, Judges, he is referred to as sword. And when I was looking up at that, what does sword mean? Actually, his name is Jehovah Cherub, which means Lord the sword. So it's very important that we see him as Lord the sword too. Why is he called Lord the sword? And at one point, this also came to my mind, that he's also God the shepherd. Jehovah Rohi, God the shepherd. Rohi, shepherd. So these two things have come into my mind, and I'm thinking, wow, this is such big dynamics of our God. This is a huge dynamics that we have to understand about our God, because God is God, and God knows what to do with people. When people are right, when people are good, he knows that he has to reward them after forgiving like thousands and millions of times. Yet when they have disobeyed and they're still disobeying, he knows that he has to pay them. Then he moves from God the good shepherd to Jehovah Cherub, Lord the sword. So this is what I wanted to, this actually, as I was reading the story of Gideon, all this while, we just concentrate on Gideon is a mighty man of valor. The angel tells him Gideon is a mighty warrior. He sees that he is a warrior. But the angel sees Gideon as a mighty man of warrior, not in his physicality, but in his spirituality. Why? Because Gideon obeyed God. Gideon did what God wanted him to do. Gideon pursued the enemies, which were the right enemies for them to be destroyed by God. So, and these enemies did not have anything, they were not his and these people plundered, these people made unnecessarily advances, and they took their crops, they ate from them, they stole from them, they did unlawful things. So God did justice to Israelites once again, and God did justice too, and God showed people like us, people like me and you, people like you and me, that God does care, and God will do what he is supposed to do in the way that he wants to do, in the rightful manner, for the rightful things, with the rightful people. So when God is on my side, I have every victory. I have many battles, but I have every victory from that each battle, and I give God all the glory, all the praise, and all the honor. And So I want you all also to be, encouraged, and see how God is, how big our God is, how huge and dynamic He is, how huge and His ways are mysterious, and He cares for us deeply, and He loves us. So, yeah, so that's one thing that I wanted to talk about today. And may the Lord bless this word, and thank you for listening.